The winters of North America were brutal, often unforgiving, and to the modern imagination, almost impossible to endure without advanced shelter. The winds swept across the Great Plains like sharp knives, snow piled in drifts that buried the land, and nights stretched on endlessly in freezing silence. Yet for centuries, Native American tribes lived, thrived, and even found comfort in these conditions. Their homes, often misunderstood by outsiders as simple tents or huts, were in fact ingenious structures shaped by generations of wisdom. This raises a question that continues to fascinate historians and storytellers alike. How did they manage to sleep peacefully in tents while blizzards raged outside? The answer is not found in a single trick, but in a tapestry of practices, designs, and rituals that transformed what looked fragile into reliable sanctuaries. To explore this mystery is to step into a world where survival was not only physical but deeply spiritual, where fire was both warmth and sacred presence, and where every detail of daily life was crafted to maintain balance with nature. In that balance lies the secret of how Native Americans made it through the harshest winters without freezing to death. Survival in the unforgiving winters was never left to chance. It was a careful, deliberate system of adaptation, tested and perfected over countless generations. The Lakota, who roamed the open plains, faced winds so bitter they could strip heat from the body within minutes. The Algonquin, living in the dense forests of the Northeast, saw snow piles so high that even the trees bent under its weight. The Navajo, dwelling in the high deserts of the Southwest, endured nights where the stars glittered in skies of ice and the air turned bone-cold the moment the sun sank. Each of these peoples faced unique challenges, yet all shared one essential truth. If they failed to understand the cold, it would consume them. Their shelters, while appearing simple to the untrained eye, were masterpieces of adaptation. The teepee, its poles angled like a funnel, directed howling winds upward and away. At its center burned a fire, its smoke carried neatly through a small opening at the top. The wigwam, with its curved frame and bark layers, mimicked the insulating properties of animal fur, trapping heat close to the ground where families huddled. The hogan, built partly into the earth, relied on thick soil walls that held the day's warmth and released it slowly through the night. None of these were crude or accidental. They were designs born of necessity, sculpted by an intimate knowledge of climate and terrain. Yet survival was not achieved by shelter alone. Tribes moved with the seasons, seeking valleys that broke the wind, forests that offered wood for fuel, and rivers that rarely froze solid. They understood the land's behavior the way others read books, predicting storms by cloud movements, and reading snowdrifts like maps. These decisions were as vital as any wall of hide or layer of bark. Equally important was the belief that survival was not a battle against nature, but a relationship with it. Fire was life itself, not merely a tool but a sacred spirit around which the family gathered. The tent was not a flimsy covering but an extension of the earth, embraced as a gift from the world rather than a shield against it. This worldview shaped not only their practices but their resilience. It turned nights of bitter cold into nights of community, ritual, and warmth, revealing that survival was as much about harmony with the natural world as it was about protection from it. The ingenuity of Native American shelters cannot be overstated. What at first glance looked like fragile constructions were, in reality, marvels of design, created with a profound understanding of both material and environment. The teepee, most famously used by the tribes of the Great Plains, was more than a simple cone of poles and hides. Its triangular shape gave it remarkable stability against wind, while the slanted sides prevented snow from piling up dangerously on the outer surface. The smoke hole at the top allowed fires to burn steadily at the center, releasing smoke upward without letting in the biting wind. This feature not only provided warmth, but also created a ventilated environment that kept the interior livable even through long nights in the northeast. The Algonquin and Iroquois constructed wigwams and longhouses, built from bent saplings covered in bark, reeds, or woven mats. The curved dome of the wigwam created an insulating effect, capturing the heat of fires that burned inside. In longhouses, entire extended families lived together, pooling resources and warmth. The design was communal by nature, reflecting not just survival but social cohesion. The Navajo, by contrast, relied on hogans, structures partly dug into the earth. The walls, packed with soil and sometimes reinforced with timber, absorbed the day's heat and radiated it slowly throughout the night, creating a natural insulation system unmatched in simplicity and effectiveness. Or each of these shelters was portable or adaptable to the seasons. Teepees could be dismantled quickly and transported by horse, ideal for nomadic hunters following bison. Wigwams could be reinforced with extra bark in winter or stripped lighter for summer. Hogans, though less mobile, were built to last, often aligned with sacred directions that gave them a spiritual as well as practical foundation. These designs reflected not only engineering brilliance, but also an understanding of balance. A teepee was not meant to dominate the landscape, but to move with it. A wigwam was not just a roof, but a living circle, reflecting cycles of nature. A hogong was not just walls and soil, but a continuation of the earth itself. In these shelters, the line between survival and spirituality blurred, showing how Native Americans transformed their environment into a partner rather than an obstacle. Asterisk. No element was more central to winter survival than fire. In every shelter, whether teepee, wigwam, or hogan, the fire burned at the core, not only as a source of heat, but as the pulse of life itself. The flames were tended with care, for they represented continuity through the night, a steady defense against the creeping cold that pressed in from all sides. The placement of fire was never random. In the teepee, it occupied the center, its smoke guided upward through the small opening above. This careful design ensured that the interior remained warm while fresh air circulated, a balance between oxygen and heat that revealed generations of refinement. Fire offered more than warmth. It dried damp clothing, cooked food, and kept predators at bay. But to Native Americans, it was also deeply symbolic. Fire was a sacred presence, a living spirit that connected families to the wider universe. Stories were told around its glow. Rituals were performed in its flickering light, and prayers were often directed through its rising smoke. The fire was not seen as a mere tool, but as a partner in survival, honored and respected as much as it was relied upon. The use of fire also demonstrated remarkable resourcefulness. Tribes knew which woods burned hot and slow, ideal for long nights, and which sparked quickly for fast cooking. Dried buffalo dung was often used as fuel on the treeless plains, producing a steady flame when wood was scarce. Stones were placed around the fire to absorb heat, then moved closer to bedding to radiate warmth through the night. These small but ingenious practices made the difference between a restless night and one of comfort. What is striking is how seamlessly practical necessity and spiritual reverence came together in the fire. Families gathered around it not just for warmth but for connection, sharing stories that bound generations together. The flames symbolized endurance, reminding everyone that even in the heart of winter, life persisted. It was both a physical and spiritual hearth, uniting survival with meaning. In this way, the fire stood as the most essential element of winter life, turning fragile shelters into sanctuaries of warmth and light amid the endless cold. Warmth in the heart of winter was never left to chance. Even with shelters and fire, Native Americans relied on layers of insulation and sleeping habits that transformed the cold into a manageable companion. Buffalo hides were the most valuable resource on the plains, serving not only as clothing but also as thick bedding and blankets. A single robe could weigh many pounds, and when layered, these hides created a cocoon of warmth that rivaled anything a modern blanket could offer. Families often slept on raised bedding platforms lined with furs, which kept them off the frozen ground where cold seeped in most fiercely. Sleeping arrangements themselves were designed for warmth. Families clustered together, with children and elders at the center, protected by the stronger bodies of adults. Dogs, essential companions, often curled at their masters' sides, acting as living heaters through the long nights. This communal style of rest was practical, but it also reinforced bonds, weaving survival into the fabric of family life. Insulation extended beyond bedding. Wigwams could be lined with moss, grass, or additional bark layers, creating pockets of trapped air that acted as natural barriers against cold. In teepees, extra hides could be draped around the frame, forming a double wall that funneled smoke out while keeping heat in. Hogans, with their earthen walls, held steady temperatures, even when icy winds battered the desert. The shelters themselves became part of the insulation system, proving that structure and lifestyle were inseparable in the fight against freezing conditions. What made these habits remarkable was how instinctively efficient they were. Every detail, from the placement of bedding to the order of who slept where, reflected a system honed by centuries of necessity. Yet it was never only about practicality. Nights were times of storytelling, prayers, and dreams, with the glow of fire casting flickering shadows across hides and walls. Sleep itself became more than rest. It was a moment of spiritual renewal, a time to connect with ancestors and the unseen world. In this way, the act of staying warm was transformed into something greater, where survival and meaning intertwined beneath buffalo hides and the steady crackle of firelight. If shelters and fire created sanctuaries, clothing served as the personal armor of Native Americans against the brutal cold. The buffalo once again stood at the heart of this system, its thick winter coat providing unmatched insulation. Buffalo robes were worn draped over the body, sometimes extending nearly to the ground, offering both warmth and mobility. Unlike rigid European coats, these hides flexed and adapted, making them suitable for movement during hunting or daily tasks, while still acting as a barrier against icy winds. Fur-lined moccasins protected feet, often reinforced with grass or extra hide, for added insulation. Layered leggings, tunics, and cloaks were crafted from deer, elk, or rabbit pelts, with each layer adding to the protective barrier. The principle was similar to what modern science calls layering, trapping warm air close to the body while preventing exposure. Clothing was tailored not only for function but also for identity, decorated with quills, beads, and dyes that carried cultural meaning even in the harshest months. Adaptation extended to unexpected techniques. Animal fat was sometimes applied to exposed skin, creating a greasy layer that reduced frostbite risk. Body paint also played a role. with certain pigments believed to provide both physical and spiritual protection against the elements. This blending of practical measures with symbolic meaning showed that clothing was never just about comfort. It was a declaration of resilience, an outward expression of inner strength. The efficiency of native clothing lay in its balance of natural resources and cultural knowledge. They understood which furs offered the best insulation, how to sew hides so that fur faced inward for warmth, and how to adjust garments with the changing seasons. Unlike European settlers, who often froze in heavy wool, native tribes had perfected garments that were light, warm, and suited for survival in shifting conditions. Clothing also carried spiritual weight. Buffalo robes, for example, were not merely garments but sacred gifts, each one tied to ceremonies that honored the animal's spirit. To wear such clothing was to carry both protection and blessing. In this way, the armor of winter was more than physical. It was woven with respect, meaning, and a profound acknowledgement of the natural world. Through their clothing, Native Americans transformed winter itself into another element of life to be embraced, not feared. Asterisk. Warmth alone could not keep a body alive in the brutal cold. To endure freezing nights, Native Americans relied on food as fuel, carefully prepared and preserved to sustain energy through long winters. Among the most important of these provisions was pemmican, a concentrated survival food made from dried meat, fat, and berries. Light to carry, rich in calories, and long-lasting, pemmican provided both strength and warmth, fueling hunters, warriors, and families when fresh game was scarce. Alongside it, strips of dried jerky and smoked fish hung in stores, ready to be used when hunting was impossible. These foods were more than nourishment. They were lifelines, each bite containing the stored energy of seasons past. Winter demanded not only preserved supplies but also clever daily strategies. Firewood was gathered and stockpiled, often long before the snow began to fall, ensuring the sacred fires could burn steadily through the season. Families placed water vessels inside shelters to prevent freezing, while snow itself was melted over fires to replenish what was needed. Nuts, roots, and dried corn from earlier harvests offered additional variety, with some tribes creating stews that could simmer for hours, maximizing both warmth and sustenance. Food carried spiritual as well as practical importance. Meals were shared communally, reinforcing bonds of kinship. Certain feasts were tied to rituals, giving gratitude for the earth's gifts, even in times of scarcity. Eating was not just survival but an act of respect, acknowledging the animals and plants that gave their lives to sustain human existence. By preserving food with such reverence, Native Americans transformed eating into a sacred exchange. Perhaps most striking is how seamlessly their diets matched the demands of winter. High-fat and high-protein foods provided the energy necessary to maintain body heat in freezing conditions. The knowledge to prepare, store, and ration supplies was passed carefully from generation to generation, ensuring no winter caught them unprepared. This deep relationship with food reveals the foresight and adaptability of native culture. For them, a simple stew was never just a meal, and a bite of pemmican was never just calories. It was the difference between vulnerability and endurance, a quiet testament to survival in a land where the cold waited for any weakness. Asterisk. To understand how Native Americans survived the cold, one must recognize that survival was never only physical. The rituals and spiritual practices tied to winter life were just as essential as fire and food. At the heart of this connection was the sacredness of fire itself. Flames were honored as living spirits, their smoke seen as prayers rising into the heavens. Around the fire, songs were sung, stories told, and ceremonies performed, creating warmth not only of body but of spirit. The fire was the center of community and faith, a constant reminder that survival was a shared journey, guided by forces larger than the self. Sweat lodges were another vital ritual, even in the heart of winter. Heated stones created waves of steam inside enclosed huts, cleansing the body, strengthening resilience, and opening the spirit to renewal. Emerging from the intense heat into the freezing air was both a shock and a purification, reminding participants of the delicate balance between hardship and vitality. These practices were not luxuries but necessities, binding physical endurance to spiritual harmony. Vision quests and dream practices also carried special weight during the long nights. Sleep was not just rest but a bridge to the spirit world, where guidance and protection were sought. Dreams were shared at dawn, often interpreted as messages that shaped decisions for the day ahead. In this way, the cold nights became spaces of revelation, where survival intertwined with meaning. Every ritual carried practical benefits as well. Songs around the fire kept minds awake and lifted spirits when hunger gnawed or storms howled outside. Ceremonies brought families together, easing the loneliness of isolation. Fasting, sometimes practiced in spiritual devotion, also taught discipline, conserving precious supplies. Even the act of offering gratitude before meals fostered resilience, reminding everyone that they lived not in opposition to nature but in partnership with it. Through these rituals, survival was elevated into something far more profound. The cold was not seen as an enemy but as another force of nature to be acknowledged, respected, and integrated into life's rhythm. Ritual and spirit transformed the harshness of winter into an arena of strength, where families endured not through fear but through harmony, guided by both tradition and faith. Spiritual life was not a separate part of existence for Native American tribes. It was the foundation on which everything rested. Ceremonies were more than rituals. They were living bridges between the visible world and the unseen. Every prayer, dance, and song carried intention, shaping not only individual lives but also the destiny of entire communities. The sweat lodge, for example, was a powerful practice of purification, where heated stones glowed like the heartbeat of the earth, releasing steam that carried prayers upward. Inside, people sought healing, guidance, and clarity, emerging renewed and balanced. Similarly, the vision quest was a journey of transformation. Alone in nature, often without food or water, individuals opened themselves to dreams and signs, receiving visions that revealed their purpose or offered wisdom for the tribe. These ceremonies were not performed lightly. They were profound commitments to honor the sacred laws of existence. The Sundance stood as one of the most powerful ceremonies, where participants danced for days in prayer and sacrifice, offering their energy for the well-being of the people. Songs and drums resonated with rhythms that mirrored the heartbeat of Mother Earth, aligning participants with cosmic harmony. Every feather, bead, and drumbeat carried symbolic meaning, reminding those present of their interconnectedness. Through these practices, Native Americans maintained spiritual balance, ensuring that human actions remained in harmony with the greater forces of life. To them, spirituality was not about separation from the world, but about immersing deeply within it, recognizing that every breath, every sound, and every movement was an offering to the sacred web of existence. Art was not created for decoration alone. It was a language, a means of transmitting knowledge, values, and sacred truths. Every line etched into rock, every bead woven into cloth, and every animal carved from bone carried meaning that reached far beyond the surface. Symbols of animals held particular significance, with the eagle representing vision and spiritual strength, the bear symbolizing courage and healing, and the turtle embodying endurance and the grounding power of earth. Colors, too, were never random but chosen with intention. Red represented life force and vitality. Black reflected transformation or the mystery of the unknown, while white carried the vibration of purity and spiritual clarity. Art adorned not only objects but also the human body. Patterns painted on faces or tattooed onto skin were both protective and expressive, signaling identity, achievements, or spiritual alignment. Storytelling was woven into art, where petroglyphs told ancient histories and beaded garments revealed tribal legends. Art was also alive in dance and song, where rhythm and movement became visual and auditory symbols of deeper realities. What might seem like decoration to an outside eye was, in truth, a sacred narrative of existence. Through art, Native Americans preserved their wisdom, encoding messages for future generations. Symbolism carried spiritual codes that ensured the continuity of knowledge long after words were forgotten. To look at Native American art is to peer into a window of spiritual depth, where every form is infused with the essence of life and every pattern is a reminder of humanity's connection to the sacred order of the universe. The story of Native American tribes is not simply a history of people, but a living testimony of harmony between humanity, nature, and spirit. Their way of life reveals that survival was never just about food or shelter, but about maintaining balance with the land, honoring traditions, and understanding that all things carry sacred meaning. From the wisdom of their oral traditions to the strength of their warriors, from the healing power of their ceremonies to the depth of their art and symbolism, every aspect of their culture carried lessons for generations yet to come. These tribes showed that true wealth lies not in possessions, but in connection to ancestors, to the earth, and to the unseen forces that shape reality. Their resilience in the face of hardship stands as a reminder that culture cannot be destroyed when it lives within the hearts of its people. To reflect on their legacy is to recognize the value of respect, balance, and spiritual awareness. Even today, the teachings of Native American tribes whisper through the land, reminding us that life is sacred and that harmony remains the greatest path humanity can walk.